So by the way, we had some issues with Zoom on one of the laptops. So we're going to be coding on one laptop and then move it over to the other one to deploy it onto AWS because AWS wasn't set up on one of them.
Good. Okay, so without any more introduction, I'm Amol,
I'm Andrew.
and we're going to be teaching you guys how to use the Amazon Web Services Cloud Development Kit. This is kind of like a brief overview of what the Cloud Development Kit is. For those who aren't like very familiar with AWS, basically it's a series of tools that developers can use to run their code online and interact with like databases, applications being serverless or with servers and things like that.
So yeah, basically we're just gonna use do a very simplified thing today to basically an intro to it. And what we've decided to create is basically an API endpoint that allows you to type in a song name and add it to a Spotify playlist. So in order to do this, we need a couple functions. The first one, finding a song on Spotify based on the name. The next one would be adding that song to the playlist. And then we're going to combine them together into an API endpoint that will then call the function to find the song and then call the function to add that song to the playlist. So without any further ado, we're going to get into the coding of it and kind of walk you through how that works. Full screen that. Yeah, and so there's going to be some syntax errors because actually, let me switch to this. Okay, so there's going to be some syntax errors because Node is not installed on this laptop. But yeah, so anyway, basically with the CDK, you basically create these stacks that hold, yes. Oh yeah, let's zoom in, yeah.
We can probably turn all the lights off and also zoom in on the
Is that good in the back or do you want us to zoom in a bit more? All right. All right, that should work. Oh, there's people in the waiting room, by the way, for the Zoom call. Okay, so yeah, so basically what we have here is one of the stacks, and you can use these stacks to add all the different things you want to create. The thing that we're going to be utilizing here is lambdas, and lambdas are basically just like a function that you call with parameters, and it will return a response once it's done. So we're going to make a bunch of lambdas, and then we're going to also make an API endpoint that's called. Yeah, so the first lambda that we want to make and is going to be like define the song. So you're just going to pass in the name of the song, and that's going to then return the Spotify URL to that song. So yeah, so basically in order to do that, we've already imported all these all this necessary information, which is like the what we need to interact with the Spotify API. So that's already been imported, and we did that ahead of time. But yeah, so we'll get started with making the first lambda. All this stuff is online and documented, and so that's kind of where would be the best place to look if you're trying to figure out how to do something new, and where we look. So we have this code already, and so yeah. So basically, the first thing we're making is the find song lambda, and so this is going to be a new function, and all this stuff, like a lot of it gets pretty complex when you look into deeply how it works, but there's like explanations online, and like you're just basically it's kind of like just like it feels like Scratch a lot here because you're plugging in different things and you're just filling out like a new function and creating this class already. So we're going to call it find song. And so here's the parameters that it uses. We're going to be making this in Python. How do you turn it off? Wait, what's that? Okay. Okay. And so yeah, there's going to be red underlines here because Node.js is not installed on this computer, or which is what the stack is in. And so where we're going to be referencing this code from is the Spotify folder where we have, where we're going to make the functions themselves. So in order to do that, you write this. Why is my computer lagging so fast? And then, so the next parameter is timeout, which is how long the Lambda will run before it ends. Memory size is how much memory that it can use. And then the handler is going to be referencing which function we're going to call. So Amol's going to make that in a second here, but it's going to go in the find song file, and it's going to be called find song. And then the last thing is the environment. So this is where we pass in the necessary like API keys and things. So we need the client ID, and we need the client secret. So yeah, so this is the first Lambda that we have, and this is all that we need to do to, like, once we deploy this thing using the CDK command, this is all that we need to deploy it. Now we have to code it into the Python file. So that's going to be in here, and we'll do that.
First thing we need to do is get those, let's get those details about the client, so the ID and the secret. And so in the previous file, which Andrew was working on, he set those to be environment variables, which allows us to just call them like this in this Python method. Actually, I think it's environ. And so in this Lambda, we're going to pass in one parameter, which goes to this event right here. So the event, it's like a JSON, so it has like key and then a value, key and then a value. And so we have one key, which is song, and that's going to be like the name of the song, or like what we're searching into, like what you'd like type into a Spotify search bar. And so we're using something called Spotify, which is a Python wrapper for the Spotify API. So I can show it. This is what it looks like. And so there's different authorization methods. This is one of them where you simply provide permission by signing in once. And it's better like if you have one application running over a while. And then this is another one. And so this one has limitations. You can only like search on Spotify. You can't like actually interact with the user's account. So for this project, we're going to actually be using both of these authentication methods. And so here we're just creating the object, which is going to pass in those credentials based on those environment variables for the client ID and the client secret key. We're missing a parentheses. Oh, computer's lagging. It's frozen. Okay, just wait a second. I guess the computer froze. Oh, there we go. Okay. So that's our like object that's going to interact with Spotify, and then we're going to call this method search. You can find it right here. Somewhere in the documentation. Features. Yep. So right here, it takes in a query, a limit. So for this example, we're just going to be looking at one thing from the search result, the top result, and the type. So for example, we're only looking at tracks for this project. So our query is going to be our search query, which is passed into this Lambda. Only looking at one of the results, and we're only looking at Spotify tracks. And so now we have to parse that result. It's going to be like a JSON object with key value pairs, and you can have like nested, so like a key, which is, and value is another example of a key value pair. So we've already done this before, so we can don't have to like look through and how to figure out how to do it. This is the format of the response, and this is how we get the first response right here. And looking at only the Spotify URL. So now we're going to be formatting our Lambda return response. So it has a body. So in our body, we only care about one thing, the song URL. And so this is the format for a Lambda return. You have to give a status code. So it's going to be 200 because it's going to return successfully, hopefully at least. The headers we're leaving them blank, and the actual body will be this body that we created up here. And then we're just going to return this.
Okay, so yeah, so they basically what we've done is we've made like a Lambda function itself, and then using the CDK, we've implemented it. So now the next step would be to deploy this to the cloud, and the commands to do that would be CDK synth, and that command basically looks at all this stuff that you've coded here, and it puts it together into like knows what you could possibly deploy, and you can deploy any of these individual stacks. So right now we only have one stack, and that's the one stack that just has one Lambda inside of it. So Drew, are we good to just switch it over just to show? Because like I have like AWS on here, but like there's no way to show it on there. Can I just show the Lambda real quick? Like switch off of this, like unplug real quick. Yeah, just real quick and show it. Okay. Well, I'm gonna run it. It'll take like a minute. So yeah, so I'll just move over here.
Oh, wait, for you, just disconnect the issue. So stop.
Hello. Hello. Okay. So yeah, so you can see our code, like it gets deployed into the cloud based on that. And in order to test this, we can basically test this here. And so does anybody have a song they want to search? Somebody's got to have a favorite song. Oh, okay. Okay, it's Fun Song SpongeBob. I hope this shows up. Wait. Okay. Okay, I hope this works. Would this probably show up if you searched it on Spotify? Okay. Okay. We'll see if this shows up. Okay. And so hopefully this works. So we did, in fact, find a song here, and we'll see if this song is what we hope it is. I don't think that's it, but we did find a song with the name Fun. So yeah, so basically now what we're going to be able to do is we can call this with any song name, and it will return us a link. So that was kind of the first step to it. And the next step is basically making it so that we can add a song using the song link to the Spotify playlist. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so the next step is to create another Lambda, which is going to be the add song Lambda. And this is going to be very similar to the other one. So your laptop's freezing every 5 seconds. Okay, so we can use the same code that we've already used, and it's basically going to be the exact same thing, just with a few changes. So we're going to do add song lambda, use all the same stuff again. This time though, it's going to be add song, and then add song again. And then for the environment this time, we're using the different authentication method. So it's going to be token, it's going to be the access token, and the username. So yeah, so that's pretty much all we need to do to make the add song lambda. So
So now that we have the actual AWS infrastructure for the Lambda, we have to actually write the code now to add the song to the playlist. So in a similar way, we're going to get those tokens from the environment variables which have been created in the CDK stack. And so for this, right now the playlist is kind of just hard coded in, but probably a better way to do it is to just pass it in as another environment variable. Let me just copy this playlist. That's the extra part of the link. It's like the query part. We don't need that part for the link for it to work. And so this Lambda is going to have one argument it takes in the event, which is going to be the URL of the song. And it's going to take that song and just add to the playlist. So there's a method in Spotify API, which is wrapped nicely for us in this Python API. User playlist add tracks. So we have a user, a playlist ID, and tracks is a list of tracks. For this Lambda, we're actually only adding one track at a time. So we just have to make that one track into a list, and then we just put it in and run the code. So we just take our song URL and just make it into a list in Python. And now we need to make our authentication. So this is with the authorization code flow for like a longer running application. So what we actually had to do is before this workshop, we had to create the token. And so it lasts for like around an hour. And a more like real world example of this, you would have some other like maybe Lambdas or some other server running, creating those tokens continuously and swapping them out so that you never have to manually authenticate anything. Okay, and that should be it.
okay, nice. So we have the second Lambda now that will add a song to the playlist on the URL. So we're going to add the song that we just found, even though it's not the right one, we'll still add it, I guess. And I'm just going to switch this back real quick to my laptop so that we can actually show this. Yeah. So again, like before, it has all of our code here that we need to use. And in order to test it, we're just going to need to pass in a song URL. And save it. No. Call it test. Yes. Okay, so I think this should now be inside of the demo one. Okay, yeah. So now the song has been added. This is probably not a great song, but we've added it to our playlist. And now we have to put it all together and call the other two Lambdas in the same Lambda, and then we can make it an API endpoint. So that means like everybody will be able to go to a URL and add their songs to the playlist. Now we'll move back now. Okay, so again, this part is very similar to what we've already done. we just need to make another lambda, which is going to be, now it's going to be find and add song lambda. Find. So yeah, so what's going to be different here is now we need to give access to the other lambdas. So this requires some IAM permissions in AWS, which basically allow, which is basically a security feature in AWS that allows you to secure different lambdas and stuff like that. So the first thing that we're going to need is we're going to need to find song lambda arn, which is, this is basically how you can reference the other lambda within AWS. And we're going to update the handler as well, which is going to be find and add song, find. Yeah, and then add song lambda arn. So yeah, those would be the references to those lambdas. And the next step is we need to give it permission. So in order to do that, we have to give it a role that has permission to access these lambdas. So we're going to give it a new policy. And this policy is just going to be just going to have permission to allow them to call the other two lambdas that we have. So the statements in this. And I know a lot of what we're writing might seem like, oh, like, how are you just like coming up with this? Like when we made this, and whenever I've worked with AWS in the past, you really heavily rely on the documentation to figure out how to do all this stuff. Like nobody memorizes all of the like how to attach like an inline policy until like years and years of experience where you've done it a lot of times. So the permission that we need here is going to be invoke function. And so then which ones are we going to allow to invoke are going to be the resources. And this is going to be find song lambda and then that reference to it. Time somebody joins the waiting room. Relax. There we go. So yeah, so that's pretty much that. So now we've attached the inline policy. And the last thing is we need to give it that API endpoint so that anybody on the internet could go and add a song to our playlist. Which is not a great idea, I guess, but, and we will make a new API gateway. So we're going to give this a name, which is find and add song. Description, find and add song. And then, so this is going to make that API gateway. And so now what we want to do is we want to add the find and add song like lambda to this gateway. In order to do that, do this, which is basically just creating a new integration and then attaching that to the okay. So, and then the last part of this is just adding this new integration to the API endpoint. So it's going to be a GET request and it's going to be find and add song integration. So yeah, that's it for the CDK. And now all we have to do is code the Python to actually find and add the song and call those different lambdas.
Okay, so the last part of this is making this lambda, which is going to take that song, like the query, search query for the song, call our find song lambda, get that URL, and then pass that URL into the add song lambda. So basically, it's like a master lambda that's going to call these two little workers to do its work. So we have to get our query, which is with the API gateway. This is how it will be passed in. Query string parameters, and we're just going to call it song. And so for this, we're using something called Photo 3. This is what Amazon has made for developers to interact with AWS servers using Python. Since in our other two lambdas, we weren't actually interacting with AWS servers. We were just running code on the AWS servers. With this, we're actually interacting by having a lambda call other lambdas. Yeah. So I'm just gonna, since we're running low on time, I'm just gonna copy this last bit of code.
Here, yeah, it's in the other one. No, why is not? Oh, it's right here. So we can just show you it here, which is, and you can talk them through it, but yeah.
So basically, we have those ARN, which is, I believe, Amazon resource name. That's like the location of where the Lambda is in this like big Amazon Web Services space. So those are environment variables since we pass them in our CDK stack. And so then we have to create the actual event, which we pass in to the first Lambda, the find song Lambda. And then using the Bodo 3, we can invoke that Lambda function since we gave it permission. So it's like a JSON, so you have to just create that, take that like dictionary object in Python and create it to like a JSON like string format. And so then we get our song URL in response. And then once we have the song URL, we can call our add song Lambda in a similar manner. And then we return a status code 200, letting the user know that it was a success.
All right, so I guess we have to switch it over to the other screen again to show what this actually looks like in AWS. So once it's deployed, you can see that there's the API gateway, which interacts with the Lambda. And so, yeah, so basically our code's here again, and now we can go to this API gateway. And here's the API gateway right here. So all we have to do now is we have to pass in a song name, which I'm going to add my favorite song, Hello, Adele. And then this should add to the playlist. It says success, and it's here. So yeah, so pretty much now we have this one endpoint that anybody could call and add songs to our playlist. So I guess we can make a tiny URL. People could add songs to it. Yeah. So we'll add this and hopefully make tiny URL. Okay, so yeah, I guess you could visit that and add a song to the playlist. Yeah.
All right, so we do have a little bit of leeway if people want to ask questions. Does anybody have any questions? Otherwise, feel free to go because the workshop is technically over. Once again, thank you to our wonderful presenters. We do have the intro to storytelling workshop going on next door. It's going to be really good, so please consider checking it out. And yeah, have a great Technica.